A lot of founders spend their time trying to force a sale. They obsess over conversion rates. They tweak landing page buttons. They run ads that scream, buy now, 50% off. They A/B test headlines until their eyes bleed. They optimize every step of the funnel. They measure everything except the one thing that actually does matter. Here's what they miss. There's a hidden cost to this approach. We call it the shouty tax. The more you treat your audience like a target to be hit, the more they treat you like noise to be blocked. Every ad that interrupts, every email that pushes, every post that begs for a click, it all adds up. Not to revenue, to resistance. If you have to shout for a sale, you've already lost the argument. You might have won a transaction. You haven't won a customer. You haven't won trust. You haven't won loyalty. You haven't won the thing that makes a business actually sustainable. You're not getting better at marketing. You're just getting better at begging for attention, and begging has a ceiling. It always has. So, to break this cycle, you have to stop focusing on the transaction and start focusing on something much deeper. Cultural resonance. Resonance has become one of those words that gets thrown around until it means nothing. So let me give it back some weight. Resonance is what happens when your brand's value mirror the daily reality of your customer. So when you have it, you don't have to convince people to buy. They choose you because you feel like a natural part of their world. Think about the difference between being tolerated and being chosen. When you shout, you get tolerated at best. People put up with your ad because they want the information on the discount. When you resonate, you get chosen. People seek you out. They want you around. They defend you to others. The difference isn't volume, it's alignment. And alignment doesn't come from better messaging. It comes from a better understanding of who you actually are and who you are actually for. At Ideeva Lab, we understand too well how brands struggle with this. We've had conversations around them needing better ads, better targeting, better funnels. What they actually need is alignment. And alignment starts with three things: identity, content, and community. Let me walk you through each one. Identity. Be a mirror, not a megaphone. A lot of brands try to appeal to everyone. In doing so, they become invisible to everyone. I understand the instincts. More people means more potential customers. It feels safer. But here's what actually happens. When you try to appeal to everyone, you end up saying nothing to anyone. You sand down every sharp edge until you're bland enough for mass consumption, and mass consumption has no loyalty. It moves to the next bland thing the moment it appears. Look at Tracksmith. When they started, the athletic wear market was dominated by massive companies shouting about high-tech fabric, neon colors, and world records. They shouted about performance. They shouted about winning. Tracksmith did something different. They focused on a specific group. Amateur runners who love the grind of a 5 a.m. workout in the rain. Runners who aren't trying to go to the Olympics. Runners who run because it's part of who they are. So they built their look around that, their voice, their aesthetics. They didn't try to appeal to everyone who runs. They appealed to runners who saw themselves in that specific identity, the amateur spirit. The early morning commitment, the love of the thing itself. Because they focused on that specific identity, their customers didn't see a brand selling clothes. They saw a brand that got them. They saw themselves reflected back. They didn't have to win a price war because they had already won the cultural one. They didn't have to shout because their customers were already listening. Here's the lesson. Don't market features to the masses. Pick a group of people and design your brand to be a mirror of their values. If the customer feels seen, they stop looking at the price tag. They stop shopping around. They stop treating you like a commodity. They start treating you like a part of their identity. Write down who you think your brand is for. Be specific. Not everyone who needs our product. Not people aged 25 to 45. Not Small business owners, that's demographic data. That's not identity. Identity is values. Identity is worldview. Identity is what someone believes about themselves and the world that they live in. So complete this sentence. Our brand is for people who believe that blah, blah, blah. If you can't finish that sentence, you don't have an identity. You have a product and a hope, and hope is not strategy. If you can't finish it, here's the next question. Does your marketing actually reflect that belief? Not your website copy, not your mission statement, your actual marketing, your posts, your emails, your ads, your conversations. Does every piece of it point back to that one belief? Now to content. A lot of firms blast out top 10 tips every single day. They publish listicles, I guess. They produce generic advice that could come from anyone. It feels like a lecture, and most people just tune it out. The problem is that this content asks for something. It asks for attention. And it gives back nothing that couldn't be found anywhere else. It's content as obligation, content as filter. Think about Yeti. They sell coolers, right? Expensive coolers. Coolers that if you just looked at the specs, you might wonder, why would anyone pay that much for a box that keeps things cold? They could have just run ads showing how cold their boxes stay. They could have shouted about the ice retention, but they didn't. Instead, they launched Yeti Presents, a series of high-quality documentaries about ranchers, fishermen, and barbecue masters. They spent their money telling stories about their customers' passions. They showed people doing the things they love in the places where a Yeti cooler actually matters. They barely showed the product. That is what we call intellectual generosity. They gave their audience something valuable, a great story, without asking for anything in return. They didn't run an ad. They didn't push a discount code. They just told a story that their audience cared about. They earned hours of undivided attention. They became the brand that understood their customers' lives, not just their need for cold drinks. So by the time someone needed a cooler, Yeti was the only name that mattered, not because they were the loudest, but because they were the most generous. So the content filter, before you produce anything going forward, write down the one thing every piece of content must reinforce. Not the topic, not the format, the belief. The thing that you want someone to walk away believing about you. Then run every idea through this filter. Does this move someone closer to believing that one thing? Does this give them something valuable they couldn't get elsewhere? Will they still consume this if it had no sales pitch attached? If the answer to any of those questions is no, don't produce it. It's not generous enough. It's not specific enough. It's not worth your audience's time. If the answer to all of them is yes, produce it. That's it. That is the entire editorial strategy. Now let's move on to community. The shift from broadcasting to belonging. Because a lot of brands treat their social media pages like a one-way street, a place to broadcast what they want to say, a place to push their message, their product, their agenda. They measure success by how many people saw their post, not by what happened after. Here is what they miss. Before Glossier was a billion-dollar company, it was a simple blog called Into the Gloss. And for years, they didn't sell anything. They just interviewed people about their messy real-life skincare routines. They let people debate in the comments. They created a space for people to talk to each other. They weren't selling. They were building a community. A place where people who cared about skincare could find each other. A place where conversations happened. A place where people felt like they belonged. When they finally launched a product, they didn't need a massive budget. The community was already there, waiting for it. The community had been built over years of conversation, years of listening, years of being the host instead of the broadcaster. So here's the thing about Glossier. They didn't build a community around their product. They built a community around a shared interest, and then they introduced the product into that community. The product served the community. The community didn't serve the product. That's a critical distinction most brands get backwards. They try to build a community around what they sell. They create a Facebook group for customers. They start a Discord server for users, and then nobody shows up because nobody wants to join a community that exists only to be sold to. So what works is the opposite. Find a conversation that's already happening. Find a group of people who already care about something. Insert yourself into that conversation as a participant, not a broadcaster. Add value without asking for anything, but build trust through generosity, not promotion. Now, there's a metric nobody measures. We call it the conversation gap. It's the distance between what you're saying and what your customers are saying to each other. So when that gap is small, your brand is resonant. When it's large, you're shouting into a void. And here is how you find it. Go find a place where your ideal customers talk to each other without you in the room. A Facebook group, a Slack community, a forum, really. Anywhere they're having conversations about the things that matter to them. Listen to what they're actually saying. What problems are they describing? What language are they using? What do they wish existed? What frustrates them? What excites them? Now compare that to what you're saying in your marketing. Are you speaking their language or are you speaking yours? Are you addressing their actual concerns or are you addressing the concerns that you think they should have? Are you joining their conversations or are you just starting your own and hoping they will show up? When the gap is small, everything works. Your content feels like it was written for them. Your ads feel like they understand. When the gap is large, nothing works no matter how much you spend. Let us pull this all together. Resonance has 3 layers. Identity is the foundation. It is who you are for. It's the belief that everything else builds on. Without it, nothing else matters. Content is the delivery system. It's the identity made visible. It's the gift you give before you ask for anything. It's how people discover who you are and why they should care. Community is the result. It is what happens when identity and content work together. It's the shared belief that turns customers into advocates. It's the thing that keeps working long after you stop shouting. So here's how they connect. Identity tells content what to say. Content attracts the right community, and community validates the identity. Then the loop starts again. So sharper identity produces better content. Better content attracts a stronger community, and a stronger community validates and sharpens the identity further. Each pass through the loop makes everything stronger. The brands that don't resonate are stuck somewhere in this loop. Either they don't have an identity, so their content is generic, or they have an identity but no content, so nobody knows who they are, or they have content but no identity, so they attract people who don't stick around. This is the culture triangle we have built at Ideeva Lab. Identity, content, community. 3 corners that feed each other. Build all 3 and the loop runs itself. Miss one and the whole thing collapses. Resonance is the loop working. Everything else is noise. Here is what happens when you invert your thinking. Instead of asking, how do we increase conversions? Ask, why would someone choose us? Instead of asking, how do we get more traffic? Ask, who is actually going to care about what we make? So instead of asking, how do we build a community? Ask, what are we offering people to belong to? And instead of asking, how do we produce more content? Ask, what are we giving that actually costs us something? These are different questions. They lead to different answers. They lead to a different kind of business. A lot of founders never ask these questions. They ask the first set, get the standard answers, and wonder why standard results never materialize. They optimize the funnel and wonder why the funnel doesn't work. The inversion is uncomfortable. It asks you to stop doing what everyone else is doing. But the inversion is also where growth actually happens. Because when everyone else is shouting, the quiet voice that actually understands is heard. Resonance takes time. It takes longer than the quick win. It takes longer than the conversion hack. It takes longer than the campaign that everyone in the room is excited about. That's the trade-off. Speed versus durability. Volume versus connection. Shouting versus resonance. The quick win feels good. It gives you a number to report. It shows progress. It justifies the budget. But the quick win doesn't build anything. It's a transaction, not a relationship. It's a moment, not a movement. Resonance feels slow at first. You're building identity when you could be running ads. You're producing generous content when you could be optimizing landing pages. It feels like you're falling behind. But here's what happens over time. The quick wins, they fade. The campaigns end. The budget runs out. The attention moves on. And then what's left? If you've been shouting the whole time, what's left is nothing. You have to start over. Resonance builds something that stays. It builds identity that survives budget cuts. It builds content that keeps attracting people. It builds community that stays when you stop paying. It builds a business that runs on something other than the next campaign. So the question isn't whether resonance works. It does. The question is whether you have the patience for it. So let me describe a business that runs on resonance. You know who you are. You've answered the identity question. Your content flows from that identity. Every piece reinforces the same belief. Your community has formed around that belief. They talk to each other, they share your content, they defend you to others. They don't just buy your products, they belong to something you've created. Your customers bring other customers. Your marketing budget is smaller than your competitors. This is what resonance actually looks like. It's not a tactic. It's not a campaign. It's a different way of building a business. And it's exactly what we help brands build at Ideeva Lab. Not campaigns that end, culture that lasts. So here's what I want you to take away from this. Stop optimizing for the transaction. Start optimizing for the person. Stop asking how to get more conversions. Start asking why someone would choose you without being asked. Stop measuring what's easy to measure. Start measuring what actually matters. The shift isn't complicated. It's just hard. It requires you to stop doing what everyone else is doing. It requires you to trust that generosity works. It requires you to build something that takes time. But here's the thing. The shift is also inevitable because the old way is dying. The shouty tax is getting more expensive every year. The attention is getting harder to buy. The noise is getting louder. The standard marketing ecosystem is becoming unsustainable. The businesses that survive will be the ones that figured out resonance, the ones that built identity before they built campaigns, the ones that gave before they asked, the ones that understood that the transaction is just a moment, but the person is everything. So here's my question for you. Are you building a business that has to shout for every sale, or are you building something that people actually want to belong to? The answer to that determines everything. So that's it on the video for today. I hope you learned a lot. If you want to talk to us, just get on our website, www.ideevalab.com. That is IDEEVA lab.com. Book a time slot and we're always happy to have a conversation. See you in the next one.